the power of I
is approaching
plus 1
to
equals
infinity.
0.
Find solutions to live peacefully and
when we read to
harmoniously
our
together.
children, it also provides
It's very important our kids to learn to assess risk.
Building on the success of last year's parent webinar series, we're excited to commence this year's program with a range of very current and pertinent topics.
My expectations of my children are that they are independent human beings and contribute back to whatever community they find themselves in. It feels very much like a shared priority between school and our family that we're concerned about the whole development of the person. My name is Kitty Potter. I'm the mother of Daniel, Lucas and Samuel Lewis, who are YCIS students. I met my husband in Taiwan and we ended up together in Hong Kong after we graduated, and then we moved to Beijing. In 2016, in summer, we moved as a family to Shanghai. The kids started out at YCIS in Beijing, but then continued with their YCIS education here in Shanghai. Do you notice what these guys are wearing?
Uniforms, I do.
Today was the first day back at school, which is always exciting. Samuel has just graduated. Lucas has just gone into year 11. Daniel is the youngest brother. He's in year 6, which is the last year of primary. Back then, when they were really little, I wasn't thinking about, long-term academic success. It was really just as a family that was really committed to living and working in China. And so that very first decision was about finding a really strong Chinese language program. But then when we visited YCIS, we realised it was even more than that. It's not just language acquisition. If you're starting to think in another language, you start to understand that way of thinking and the culture and the values and all of the things that go along with language, all of the benefits to accessing cultural opportunities, creating a sense of community and providing opportunities that go beyond classroom learning. I joined the Parent Ambassador Group almost 2 years ago. Because I really wanted to give something back to the school and to the community. In terms of the relationship between school and parents, I do think it is about partnership, school trusting parents and parents trusting school. You have to be on the same page when it comes to what your expectations are of the children. Are they getting all the support that they can get to develop, as a whole human being who's going to be resilient, who's going to be able to face all of the challenges in life? What do you want, darling? My hope is that each of them finds something to do with their lives that they're really passionate about. You don't have to be the top of all your classes. You just really have to reach your own potential, because then that gives you an opportunity to decide what you want to do in your life, and it gives you choices.
Good evening, parents, staff, and friends of the UCHEM and UWA schools. Welcome to the 6th episode of our Parents Webinar Series 2 this school year. The presentation will be broadcasted on PolyV and in both English and in Chinese. WeChat users can also watch the English broadcast with Chinese subtitles on our YCYW official WeChat channel. This evening's topic is attachment and education. My name is Hovind, currently working as the Institutional Advancement Officer of YCIS Hong Kong, but I am also an alumni of YCIS Beijing. I will be your host for this webinar. We are delighted to welcome the presenter, Ms. Jeanie Dean, all the way from Australia present on this topic online this evening. Jenny is a specialist in safety, protection, and safeguarding across a diverse range of sectors, including but not limited to education. Join this webinar to gain greater understanding and awareness of attachment and how this enhances or harms your child's academic performance. As usual, we will have a Q&A session towards the end of the presentation, so feel free to leave any questions that you might have, and Jenny will answer them after the presentation. We will also try to reply to your questions in the chat room as best as we can. It is time now to hear from our presenter, Ms. Jeanie Dean.
Hi everyone, my name's Jeanie Dean. It's lovely to be online with you all to talk about emotional attachment and education. What we're going to be focusing on in today's discussion is the relationship between secure attachment and academic performance. There is a very strong link between the importance of a secure attachment journey on a child and how they actually engage and connect within the educational environment. So this is wonderful to be online with you all. My name is Jeanie Dean. I'm the Managing Director of Safeguarding Solutions Australia, and we're an organisation who provides a range of bespoke services, including mainstream services associated to the protection, rights, preservation and assessment and compliance requirements associated to providing services to children, young and vulnerable adults in a range of sectors and industries, not just within the education sector, also to do with employment, industrial regulations, etc. So we're really, really excited to be here with you today, and can't wait to obtain your feedback on today's session. What we are going to be talking to you about today is obviously an attachment in the context of education, but we're going to break it down into 4 parts. So the unintended impacts of success. What we know is that when we're working with children and young people who come from affluent or highly successful families, that often that success comes at a cost, and that cost is generally time and emotional availability and investment. Some families do this really, really well. I don't know how. It's very difficult. I have 2 children of my own. I have an incredibly busy career, but what my kids have taught me is the importance of is being present and available to them in order for them to be able to create their own version of success. We're going to talk about attachment theory and different styles of attachment, and what we're obviously all aiming for is for our kids to have a secure attachment with us. Then we're going to talk about if a secure attachment isn't present, how does that have an impact on education? And then we're going to talk about the relationship and what we can do about that, and introduce you to the concept of earned attachment. So let's kick off first of all by talking about the unintended consequences or the unintended impacts of success. And these are questions that we often don't turn our attention to because they're not nice. And as human beings, we like to live our lives in the warm and fuzzy, right? So we don't like to focus our attention on things that are negative. We like to look at the positive. And so when we think about success, we think about high-paying roles. We think about leadership. We think about influence. We think about notoriety. We think about being a celebrity. We think about having enough money to be able to provide our kids every opportunity that we may or may not have been able to have access to as a child. We want a nice house. We have a nice car. Our kids have access to the greatest extracurricular activities that is known to man. And these are all great. These are all great things to work and strive for, as long as we're paying and drawing our attention to what all of this means as it's developing and as it's happening and as it continues to be maintained. What does this actually take away or have an impact, and how does it have an impact on kids? Your kids, so as you've been working 17-hour days, turn your attention to that 17-hour day has meant 17 hours that I haven't had with my child. How does my child feel about that? How does that 17-hour day impact the way that my child's going to concentrate at school tomorrow when their relationships at school are a little bit fractured? So what we have to think about is what are the unintended consequences of being successful? And they are that you're more time poor, there's greater pressure, and all of that comes at a cost. And often that cost actually relates to how our children actually develop and form relationships with us. So success is a really abstract concept, right? So it's very difficult to define, and it means different things to different people. Why I think the question we need to be asking ourselves as adults in the first instance is, why is success so important to me? What is it that this career that I work in, that I work tireless hours in, what does that actually give me in terms of feeling secure, feeling comforted, feeling empowered, feeling powerful? And these things, are important for all of us. We all want to feel powerful. We all want to feel empowered. We all want to feel like we mean something, and what we do means something to ourselves and others. And we want our families and our children to be proud of us. What we have to also think about, though, is that what you define as success and what success looks like for you in your developmental journey into adulthood may not necessarily be what it is that the children or young people that you provide parenting or parenting advice or caregiving for is what they define as success. And I think the earlier we have this conversation with children, the more secure attachments can be, because the expectations are clear and understood and accepted. When we don't have those conversations about, what's important to our children, and we give them a right of reply in matters that directly affect them, it means that we almost impose our own definitions of success onto the child, and the child then has this fear of failing, and and loses confidence because it's actually not something that they want to do. When we think about the definition of success today, it's about the attainment or accomplishment of wealth, position, honor, social status, fame, and the like. And when we think about the technological environments that we work in right now, success can be achieved in an instant. The years of having to go to uni for 4, 8, 6, 8, 10, 12 years is gone. You can become insta famous in a moment, and that translates to feeling successful. And that may be what it is that the children and young people that you provide care to, that may be what they want. And we have to then have conversations with them about, well, how sustainable is that? So when I have conversations with my 15-year-old son who says, I want to be a pro cricketer, it's like, okay, well, that's great. And I'm really excited that you've got that ambition and that vision, and I'm going to support you to be able to achieve that goal. But we need to make sure that we've got a backup plan, because what happens if you get injured? What happens if you lose the love of the game? And then all you've got is a retired cricket bat and no other skills. And so we need to either make those skills transferable by uplifting them and engaging in other forms of study or other forms of employment. So you can see that the delivery is really important, because I'm not going to say to my son, which I've heard other parents say to their children, is the chances of you being a pro cricketer are slim to none. So that then minimises the child's dream, impacts their self-worth, and that relationship becomes less emotionally supportive. And so the interaction becomes anxious because the child doesn't know what to expect from you. So what we want to do is set the scene a little by showing you a video that's delivered through the voice of a child around what some of these attachment presentations can look like and how they can play out in the voice of the child. So what I'm going to do is turn that video on. While you're watching this, I want you to think about your own children and whether or not any of this relates to you with them and what you see in them. I want you to think about your own childhood, and did you ever feel this way? And if you did, what did you do about it? Or could you do anything about it? And when you did try to do something about it, if you did, were you listened to? So I just want you to think about that. And if you've got a notepad and pen handy, maybe just jot down a few points and keep that front of mind for reflection later on.
You probably think you know me. I'm the loud one, the quiet one, the one who doesn't listen.
The one with the short attention span.
The one at the back who never makes a contribution.
The one with no boundaries.
The one with no friends.
The one who's too helpful.
The one who flies off the handle.
The one who is always showing off. The one who can't help lying. The one with the temper.
The one with the issues. The needy one, the angry one, the stupid one. But you don't know me at all. That's just what you see on the outside. That's not me. I'm inside. And no one sees inside. Because inside, I'm hurting.
Okay. So I hope the video was as impactful for you as it was for me. I really enjoyed hearing the lived experience of a child through their own voice and in their own narrative. It's really, really powerful. So from that, what we can take away is that there are 4 different attachment types. So we've got secure attachment, insecure avoidant attachment, insecure ambivalent attachment, and insecure disorganized attachment. And I'm going to go through each of these in a moment. All right. So the purpose of attachment, first of all, let's set the scene with what it is and why it's there. So the purpose of attachment isn't to play, feed, set limits, teach a child new skills. These are roles in which we hold, right? So if we think about parenting and link our parenting responsibilities to a position description for a job. And in that position description, there would be the roles and responsibilities of the parent, which are these items that you can see on this slide just here. So, the role would be to play and entertain children, to feed the child as and when is required, to set limits for the child associated to safe systems of work. So I'm translating this into a position description, participate in professional development opportunities, right? So if we translate the role of a parent into a PD, that's what the role and responsibility section would look like. Then in your PD, underneath that, it's got to abide by all organisational systems, policies, procedures, and legislative obligations. And this is where attachment sits. So attachment sits as the baseline for what the interaction with a child should look like. And this is what's going to give the child the greatest opportunity to be successful in their life. So attachment is where the child will use you, the parent or the caregiver, as a secure platform of which to explore when necessary, seek comfort, security, support, and safety from you. So this kind of sits back to when we think about, the minimum standards of practice that you have to abide by, like a code of conduct in a position description. The attachment concept is almost like the code of conduct. There's a set of kind of key skills that need to be demonstrated in order to create a safe environment for a child or young person to be able to be successful, feel safe, feel secure, and be able to kind of navigate the world around them in a safe way. All right. So insecure avoidant attachment. So these are children who have generally experienced insensitive, intrusive, or rejecting caregiving. Now, this sounds really harmful when you say words in this way. But what this could potentially mean is a family with a significant degree of pressure, whether that be financial, family violence, whatever it may be. There could be a series of pressures that the child is continuously being exposed to. But those pressures are also resulting in the caregiver not being emotionally available or connected to the child. So they become emotionally unavailable or detached from processes in a consistent way. So it doesn't necessarily mean that if a child has an attachment issue that they come from a severely abusive background. That does not necessarily be the case. A child that presents with a disorganized attachment, absolutely you're seeing an overrepresentation of significant trauma and complex trauma histories. When you see children with insecure avoidant or insecure ambivalent, you're not necessarily looking at that same degree of risk associated to traumatic lived experiences. Doesn't mean that it's not present, but disorganized attachment is really where you see those cohorts of children. Bergen and Bergen says that the children that experience experiences this kind of attachment style are self-reliant and high achieving. socially uncomfortable. They can present indifferent and avoidant of close connections and relationships, fearful of emotional dependency, and can find it difficult to ask for help, and have difficulty activating their critical thinking and creative thinking brains. And when they get overwhelmed, they can experience an emotional outburst, so they become dysregulated. Funnily enough, this is me. So I, because of my own lived experiences, grew up with an insecure, avoidant attachment style. And then what I'm going to talk to you a little bit later on about is the earned attachment capability. So you actually can recover from different attachment styles over time. That is reliant on the caregivers recognizing that they've got some changes that they might need to make in order for you to be able to meet those emotional milestones for yourself. We then have the ambivalent attachment style, which talks to kids that have experienced inconsistency and largely unresponsive caregiving. So this is when we're seeing parents that are completely emotionally unavailable, who don't respond to the children's emotional needs when children present with emotional regulation issues, and it's basically kind of pushed off to the side, or we see this push-pull dynamic. So I'm happy to have you now and I'm happy to support you now because it works for me and I've got time, and then the same situation could arise the next day and the parent is completely unavailable. So it's really important that we understand what these look like and the severities and how they kind of how they become present within the life journey of your children. And largely that is as a result of the relationships that they have been or have not been able to form with their caregivers. These children are easily frustrated and can be both clingy and distant at the same time. They can present with low maturity and poor regulation skills. They can experience excessive worries. So kids that are constantly worried about things and worried about what if I don't do good on this test? What if I make a mistake when I make this slime? What if I say the wrong thing? And what that can translate, so when kids don't have the words to be able to articulate those worries and fears, it manifests physiologically in the body. And so there is a resource that's called The Body Keeps the Score, or The Body Remembers. It's an amazing book if you're interested. And it basically talks about how the body manifests pain, worry, and trauma, and basically tries to send the message in a physiological context. So kids that complain a lot of tummy aches is referred to as what's called an abdominal migraine, and it's basically a trauma response that they're unable to articulate, and so the body manifests it in a pain response. These kids fear loss and abandonment. They can demonstrate attention-seeking behaviours. So when we think about attention-seeking behaviours, kids that take food and hide food and eat lots of chocolate all at one time. We're nearly at the Easter period. So when we see kids that are taking it. Now, sometimes this can be age appropriate, but when we're thinking about young children who are demonstrating these behaviours, what we're thinking about is what is it giving to them? So think about when you eat a really delicious dessert and what happens inside your body when that dessert's really delicious and you salivate and it feels really good and you feel relaxed and you feel peaceful. That's what the child is looking for. So because the child isn't able to access that through a relational network, they then look for other ways in which they can get that same self-soothing mechanism to kick in and that cortisol hormone, that stress hormone, to slow down and see an increase in what's referred to as oxytocin. So it's really important that we think about why children do what they do. Be curious. Kids don't do the wrong thing for the sake of doing the wrong thing. They might be doing things that you perceive to be wrong as a means to self-regulate and self-soothe. All right. We then have insecure or disorganized attachment. Really important to understand that this is a minority cohort, and these are kids that generally have quite extensive and profound trauma histories or abandonment and rejection issues associated to significant levels of neglect. So these children can be controlling and are often really easily overwhelmed, so they can be triggered really, really quickly. They have a negative view of themselves and other people, so kids that are constantly saying that this person's this and that person's that and that's that and I can't do that because I'm just this. This is where you might start seeing some disorganized attachment style. They have difficulty trusting the intentions of other people, so they can't align with a relationship because everything in the world is frightening and they're frightened of everything. They can be highly vigilant and easily distracted, have a strong sense of fear, panic, or helplessness, and can be unpredictable and demonstrate extreme and distressing behaviours. and are highly sensitive to criticism. Now, most children are really sensitive to criticism, but the more securely attached the child is to the caregiver providing it, the more likely they are to see it as something supportive and helpful, and less about being fearful of the information being provided. And then we have secure attachment, which is what we're all aiming to achieve. And the good news is that even if these other attachment, these insecure attachment types are present within your child's life, there is an opportunity to look at earned attachment and being able to support the child move through those stages of ambivalence and anxiety. These children often will trust and be relaxed in the relationships that they have available to them. They have a felt sense of safety, so they can leave the house without feeling worried. They can enter a new social circle without fear. They'll make the most of the opportunities that they're given. They'll give, if we think about the analogy of being a have-a-go kid, these kids often have secure attachments. They are generally more emotionally resilient and self-aware, so they can see what part they may have played in a relationship falling away, whereas a kid with an insecure attachment will think that it's everybody else, and basically it'll be some self-loathing. So everybody's like this because I'm like this, and it becomes their fault, whereas a child with a secure attachment will be able to see both sides of the coin. They'll generally have greater levels of self-esteem, and they're not afraid to be close to people. They're not anticipating somebody going to hurt them, and so they can generally be quite giving in terms of their level of closeness with a caregiver. They're willing to change and overlook others' faults, so they don't fixate on that as a potential threat or fear. They're open to being able to say, well, I think I could have done that better, so I'm going to be better next time, and I'm going to communicate that. And they generally are stronger at resolving conflict and problem solving independently. This is just a very short research study that was done. I think it was about 135 children and caregivers that participated in this study. And the priority of the study was to look at the prevalence of attachment in middle childhood, and in the context of a general population. And you can see that the results are really variable, right? So they're really diverse. And the reason why this is attachment patterns have long-term significance on the socio-emotional development of a child, and remembering that as those patterns of developments occur over time, there's more and more influences relationally that allow us to gain different levels of perspective, which supports earned attachment. So for me as a child, I was definitely in the insecure or avoidant category, and I'm probably now moving between that insecure, avoidant and secure. And that's where you can see the data is, 36.6 to 75.6 and 6.7 to 36.8, where you're seeing these higher scales of prevalence associated to a particular attachment style. You might be seeing a crossover between a secure attachment and an insecure attachment. So we can actually get better and feel safer in our relationships as we grow older, which is great, and it's wonderful when it works really well. So how does attachment impact educational outcome? Well, research is saying that, and this is still an area of research that's still very much in its infancy. However, what studies are saying at the moment is that the linkages between secure attachment and academic performance is definitely a factor that needs to be considered, and it plays, secure attachment plays an important role in a child feeling as though they can participate openly and actively within their educational context, and it improves their overall academic achievement, which is wonderful. But what we need to do now is look retrospectively at the children and young people within educational facilities or extracurricular activities and think about, well, what do we need to be doing more of, less of, or upskilling so that we can provide extra levels of support to help earned attachment for those children that have an avoidant or insecure attachment style. What could we be doing more of? And I think that this research is really going to go a long way to supporting the education and awareness of parents, caregivers, education facilities, extracurricular providers, a whole range of things. So it's really exciting. It's a really exciting time. So adolescent attachment in this research did influence academic performance. High performance was exhibited among secure attachment groups compared to their insecure counterparts, and adolescents from affluent families used avoidant insecure attachment styles as a strategy to manage stressful situations in their academic life. What this tells us is that when we've got an affluent dynamic, so, a lot of attachment is assessed looking at a lower socioeconomic profile. What we have paid attention to is, okay, well, that's great, and that's great research and theory to have, but what does it mean for parents who are trying to do their best to give as much as possible to create the greatest opportunities for success, whatever that might mean, for their children? What does that mean in terms of how emotionally available they are to the child whilst they're working for all of this to happen? And we know that success doesn't come easily, right? So we know that it's difficult, and we know that it takes a lot of hours, it takes a lot of study, it takes a lot of research, it takes a lot of manpower. And so if you're the leader of that organisation, or you are the executive within that organisation, all of that pressure goes to you. And that pressure means that something's got to give somewhere. And often what we see is it's the family dynamic that generally gets impacted by success. So when we look at secure attachments, I won't spend too much time on this table because we've kind of gone through each of these layers, but you can really see here the crossover and the intersection between the different attachment styles. And it's like, well, this could be something that's happening in our life every second day. If you see an overrepresentation of a child that kind of moves into a stress response quite quickly, you're probably looking at some kind of attachment issue. If we're seeing a child that constantly is fearful of people not being available or being mean to them or abandoning them or rejecting them, we're probably looking at something in terms of an attachment style. And if we see children that are being impulsive and kind of pushing relationships away, then we again want to be curious and inquiring about, well, why don't you want that relationship? Tell me what's happened to be able to help me understand what your needs are and why these needs why these supports that are around you, you're not wanting to participate in. It doesn't mean that they're being insubordinate or they're being problematic. It just means that they're probably scared of them and they don't know what they're there to do and what might happen in terms of that relationship when it doesn't work well, because the earlier kind of depictions that they've had in their relationships with their parents or caregivers, while their parents or caregivers have been trying to build this amazing successful life to give these kids these amazing opportunities, has disrupted the way that they interpret other relationships in their lives, of which parents then rely on to be able to provide the right supports to their kids, right? So I can even say this as a parent of children when teachers might call and say, Will, which is my son, has been really disruptive in class today. And because I'm so busy in my head, I'm like, this is a classroom issue. As a teacher, I have an expectation that you'll deal with this. But in order for the teacher to be able to deal with this, he needs to understand the relationship that the child has with their familial kind of context, because that's going to determine how hard or how difficult it's going to be for the teacher to form that relationship and the child to trust it. So you can't really have one without the other. All right. So we're going to talk a little bit now about what can you do today to be able to create more secure relationships with children and young people tomorrow. So when we think about our relationships, we need to be thinking about attachment in the context of these relationships as an interactive process of emotional communication and reciprocal exchange. Without early identification and treatment in adolescents or young people who experience attachment issues, it can lead to having problems at home, in school, and forming friendships and relationships. When we think about this really stems down to what can we do as adults to support our children have secure attachments throughout their life and as they move into the developmental stages of early adolescence and adulthood. So there's kind of 4 key elements that we can work on in terms of looking at secure attachment, and that is ensuring that children have a felt sense of safety, a felt sense of comfort, a felt sense of being seen and known, and a felt sense of being valued. When we think about safety and security, what we want you to think about is inviting your child to connect with you without judgment. So looking at the child's lived experiences and adopting that in terms of the same degree of reaction, response, and assistance and support as what you would be receiving as a functioning adult in your workplace. We want you to be delivering that same degree of importance on things that are important to you to things that are important to your child. So if they're having a fight with their friend at school, we want to be investing in that with the same degree of emotional investment that the child is delivering it in. We want to be reciprocating that. Helping a child understand that they're not alone, and the way in which you model the way that you communicate really supports that. Don't be a source of fear for your child. So if your child's coming to you with an issue and that issue seems minor in comparison to what other stresses that you're dealing with as an adult, it's really important that we don't say later and thinking about, and you just saw my facial expressions, a frown of the brow, the sharpness of my tone, and the delivery of a clear and concise message that has an undertone of frustration. This creates a source of fear in your child in terms of bringing other things to you in order to help them problem solve and navigate the world around them in a safe way. Reconnect with your child post a disagreement. So if there is and we're humans, we're not always going to agree, and that's okay. But if we have a disagreement with our child, the most important thing we can do is enact some relational repair. And that is by demonstrating to your child that it's okay not to agree, but it's really important that once we have a disagreement that's gotten a little bit heightened with some frustration, that we reconnect and reflect on what kind of created that pathway for frustration and what we could do differently in our relationship to hear each other better moving forward. This then provides the child with permission to freely express their emotions and their needs without punishment or minimization, which is really the key point here in terms of security. Then we want to think about how your children are seen and heard. Acknowledge your child using active listening. Don't have a phone in front of you while your child's trying to have a conversation with you, whether that be about work, school, friendships, sibling kind of disagreements. It's really important that when you're there, you're physically present and you're actively participating in the conversation, not through the barrier or the distraction of a phone or a laptop. Reflect back with the child about what they've said to you. So when they've relayed a message, ensure that you relay it back to them and give them permission to correct you if you've got it wrong, and take the time to understand what they're going through and the pressures that they might be feeling as a result. Remember that what's stressful for you is going to be very different to what the lived stresses are for a child in an educational environment. And although it might not seem as severe to you sometimes we minimise as well because of our own lived experiences as children of, oh, well, I'm okay now. So you just kind of deal with it and move on. In the moment, remember what that felt like when you weren't heard and how lonely and how isolated and how scary that felt. And be vulnerable and let the child know that you're not going to get it right all the time. You're not going to be exactly who they need you to be all the time. And it's okay for us not to be successful all the time. This is how we learn, and we can learn together. And then last but not least, it's soothing and security. So when we think about soothing, what we want to think about again is that physical presence. So making sure that we're physically available to our kids. We want to remain calm. And this talks about soothing, right? So when a child is elevated, we don't want to get elevated with them. We want to bring that kind of equilibrium and provide that balance. We teach emotional expression to our kids by the way in which we respond to our children when they're in a time of need. And if we're responding with frustration, dismissal, minimization, an absence of priority, an absence of active listening, the children are going to model those same behaviours back to teachers, other caregivers, family members, siblings, and friendships groups, which obviously makes it really hard for a child to actually form a secure attachment within their world and in their connections. And remember what it's like to be a kid. Out of everything that we've kind of shared so far, just don't forget what it was like to be a kid. Remember to put those kids' shoes back on and remember what your life was at school. Remember what your parental situation was like within your own family home. Remember what the strain on your relationships with your siblings and friends were. And if you're a person that had really, really great opportunities in terms of really strong and secure networks and friendships, that's great for you. But what I would invite you to think about is, what is it that you were provided that allowed you to feel that way by your parents? And is that something that's translated into the way in which that we parent our children at the moment or caregive for children at the moment? What we find is obviously the pressures that our parents were under when we were younger, as opposed to the pressures that the world in terms of its technological advancement over time, which means that we're expected to be available all of the time, because there is a mechanism that allows us to be available all the time. And once that standard's been set, it means that other things have to give. And generally, it's the emotional availability and connection to our family, children, partners, etc., that generally are compromised because of those external stresses associated to being successful in employment. So please have a think about your own lived experiences and what it was like for you, and think about how that translates into the way that you provide care or parent the children in your life. It has been an absolute pleasure sharing a very high-level snapshot of what attachment looks like and how it impacts education. And it's really clear that the greater level of security in an emotional exchange with a parent or caregiver, the more successful children will become in other aspects of their life, including education. If children have safety and security in the context of their lived experiences within their family networks, including with their parent or caregivers, they have more opportunity to be more open-minded in terms of other opportunities such as education and putting their best foot forward without fear of punishment. So sometimes the fear of not doing well can immobilise a child to not actually try their best, because they're going to get in trouble anyway, so what's the point? So please be mindful of how important these secure attachments are, how important it is to be emotionally connected and available to children and young people, and just how much of an important role your modelling, your connection, your engagement actually plays in how successful your children are academically. If they're not academically performing, it's not necessarily because they're naughty, bad and sad. It could just mean that there's an emotional need there that's not being met, and the only way for that to be addressed is for the family as a nucleus to actually work together in terms of being able to get those needs met and think about what are the stresses that exist within a family network that potentially are having an impact on these secure connections being formed. It has been an absolute pleasure speaking with you all. I do invite you to take a look at our website and have further conversations with your education providers around what you could be doing differently to be more emotionally available and connected to your child tomorrow. Best of luck, everybody, and it has been an absolute pleasure.
We hope you all have enjoyed the presentation today, and we have received many good questions from our audience in the chat room. So now let's put some of them to Jenny and hear about her thoughts. So Jenny, let's have a look at some of the questions received. One of them are, is attachment only a problem if children are struggling at school or socially?
No, definitely not. There's a range of circumstances of where attachment can become insecure, avoidant or ambivalent, but also many interactions and overrepresented that secure attachment is present. I think it's really important for people to understand that attachment is a really complex emotional bond that develops between a child and their primary caregiver. It plays a critical role in a child's emotional and social development, both of which have a direct impact on obviously your child's academic performance. And attachment difficulties can occur in a range of circumstances and due to a range of different factors. And some of those could be neglect, and that neglect doesn't need to be intentional. It could be that as a busy family, you've got lots and lots of competing priorities. And what we tend to not realise is that over time, we lose emotional interaction and emotional connection with our children and with each other. Sometimes that can translate into inconsistencies, frequent separations from your children due to, priorities with work, and other stresses environmentally, like loss of family members, etc. Children who experience these challenges can develop what's referred to as an insecure attachment, which you learnt about today. And this can lead to a range of emotional and behavioural problems within childhood and into adulthood. And it's really important that as parents, we understand that attachment difficulties can be addressed with an appropriate intervention like therapy, parenting support programs, other forms of support available via your school wellbeing services. And the earlier these issues are identified and addressed, the better the outcome for your child and for your family more broadly.
Thank you, Jenny. So I believe parenting or caregivers play a really crucial role uh, to children in these cases, which lead us to the second questions we have. What if the parent asks, I am a very busy parent with competing priorities and pressure from work. What could I do to positively impact my child on a daily basis?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I myself am a mother of two children and I have an incredibly busy career. And when you're a busy parent with lots of competing priorities and pressure, it's really understandable that you struggle to balance all of those responsibilities. But it is really essential as a parent that we recognize that our children's emotional and social development requires consistent and meaningful interactions with us as the parent. If you're frequently busy and distracted, your child could be feeling neglected, they could be feeling unimportant, which can lead to an attachment difficulty and a range of emotional and behavioural problems. Children need attention, they need affection, they need a sense of security from their primary caregiver or parent, and they need to develop healthy attachment patterns. It's important to carve out time in our busy schedules as parents to connect with our kids regularly. This doesn't have to be an elaborate, time-consuming, expensive activity. It could be as simple as having a daily check-in, engaging with your child in a shared activity, and it could be to be present and attentive during these moments in order to demonstrate that they are the priority. This means not having a phone in your hand, not having your laptop close to you, not taking a call when you're dedicating those times, and make sure that we seek supports. If we are struggling, even as busy parents, seek the support of our friends and family members or colleagues and professional resources to try and take some of the time away from us so that we can dedicate that time to our children.
Right. And I believe, throughout a child, while they're growing up, they build up multiple relationships with people around them, like parents and teachers and other caregivers or even friends. So one questions we have here is, how does insecure attachment impact my child's relationship with me as a parent or others in their world, like teachers or other people that care about them?
Insecure attachment can significantly impact your child's relationships with you and the world and the others in their world around them, including their teachers. When a child has an insecure attachment pattern, they struggle to trust. They can struggle to manage emotional regulation. So they might have outbursts that seem disproportionate to the situation that's occurring. They may have difficulty in different social interactions. And this then obviously impacts their relationships with adults and peers, not only in childhood, but into adulthood. If your child has an insecure attachment to you as the parent, they may be hesitant to seek comfort or support from you when they are upset or distressed.
Right. Thank you. So, many parents are concerned, it's absolutely or normal to form attachments throughout a child's interactions with other people and in their lives, but parents are also concerned if there are any long-term impacts if a children don't have the opportunity to form positive attachments.
Yeah, there are long-term impacts of not having the opportunity to form secure attachments, or when the opportunity for an earned attachment to be present can be significant and far-reaching. And some of these long-term impacts of insecure attachment are difficulty in regulating emotions. So children who don't form secure attachments can struggle to regulate the way they respond to adversity. Poor social skills, children with insecure attachments can have difficulty forming healthy and safe relationships, and this can lead to social isolation or interacting with antisocial peers. Behavioural problems, they could be aggressive, impulsive, have features of disobedience. Disobedience can be an indicator of an insecure attachment. Academic struggles are quite significant. So if you've got a child with an insecure attachment pattern, they can have difficulty at school around concentration, comprehension, because they're not able to actively connect with the world around them, which makes it difficult to feel safe within that world. And then it moves into the attachments in adulthood. Adults who don't form a secure attachment pattern as a child can struggle to form a healthy relationship. and more likely to be in relationships that are unhealthy and potentially unsafe.
So again, I believe, from my point of view, I believe parents are one of the people that builds a long-term relationship with their child. And now the question is, for parents, how can parents really demonstrate to children that they want to be connected and attached to their children, throughout their daily lives?
Yeah, so parents can demonstrate their desire to be connected and attached to their children in multiple ways. Some quick practical solutions for today, however, that can help strengthen the parental and child attachment bond is the use of language. The words we use have such a significant and profound impact on our children's well-being. Using positive language like "I love you," "I'm proud of you," "we're in this together," failure is part of success. You can help your children to feel valued and secure in their relationship with you as the parent. Be present and attentive. Children need attention and affection from their parents to develop a healthy attachment. Taking time to be present and attentive during these interactions, such as meals or playtime. Be present during your family meal. Make sure that you engage in some sense of play with your children as a means to strengthen the security of that bond. Engage in shared activities and make sure that these are activities that not just you choose because it's got an educational component to it and you think it's in your child's best interest. Give your child the freedom of choice to choose what activities they want to do and have you form part of to help get to know them. Physical affection. Intimate co-regulation is a huge part of secure attachment. Physical touch, such as hugs, little snuggles on the couch while you're watching a movie, sharing a toy with one another can really help children feel secure and loved by a parent. And most of all, obviously, we want to be responsive to our children's needs. Responding to your child's emotional and physical needs quickly can help build trust and strengthen attachment. The thing that's important to remember is the repair. As parents, we're busy, we get frustrated, we get tired, we get frustrated with our children not doing what we want them to do. And it's okay for us to not get it right all the time, as long as we repair and we validate what that experience was like for our child. And we shouldn't never be afraid to say sorry. We want to be modeling to our children that it's okay not to get things right all the time. This is also what promotes a secure attachment, because it means we're instilling a sense of safety in the relationship to be vulnerable and not always get things right.
Thank you, Jenny. I think that kind of give our parents a brief idea or even an in-depth idea of what they can do to their child, which leads to the last question, last but not least, for our audience sitting here listening to the webinar today, how can we support our own child to develop positive attachment with ourselves and with other people around them?
For those on the webinar today, if you're interested in supporting your child to start earning attachment, so when we recognize a child might have some features of insecure attachment, what we want to do is allow them to start earning some security back in those relationships. And there's a few practical solutions that you can try. And remember that all of these will require the time and emotional investment of you as the adult, as the parent or the caregiver. We want to be providing a safe and secure environment for our children. In order for children to feel secure, they need to feel safe and develop healthy attachment patterns. And that means their basic needs are being met: food, shelter, safety. Safety is around psychological safety, not just our physical safety. We want a consistent routine for children to thrive. Children rely on routine for security and to feel safe. Establish consistent routines, particularly around when we get up in the morning, meal times, bedtimes, and daily activities. It's really important that we don't try to replace your role as the parental caregiver with another person. Children need to feel that intimate regulation with a parent or caregiver. Use positive reinforcement like praise and rewards. Try and stay away from punishments and negative consequences. What we want to do is use each of these things as a learning opportunity and use positive reinforcement to create strength. Have positive interactions, and this is where we have to learn how to play again. As adults, we forget how to be a kid. It's really important that we reconnect with that when we have children, because that's how children learn, is through play. And if you're really struggling because of your own lived experiences, and perhaps as an adult you were never taught how to play, and I fell into that category also due to my own lived experiences, I wasn't taught how to play, and so I had to learn, and I sought professional support in order to do that. If you're struggling to establish a healthy attachment with your child, seek professional support, whether that be from your own private psychologist or a counsellor at school that can support you in understanding attachment and what you could be doing better. It's important to remember that building healthy attachment patterns takes time. It's not something that's going to happen overnight, but by providing a safe, secure environment, building consistent routines, using positive reinforcement with appropriate strength-based, empowering-based language, showing empathy and being responsive to your child's needs, you can support you and your child to start earning attachment now. You don't have to wait until something goes wrong. This is something that as parents we should be doing all the time, not just because we see a problem.
All right, thank you, Jenny, for those very wonderful, informative answers. I believe our parents and now, or our audience for today's webinar, they have a better understanding of what positive, attachments are, and how to build up and build up that kind of regular habits throughout their daily lives with their child. So thanks again, Jenny, for the wonderful presentation and the answers to the questions.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much for all your questions and comments in the chat room. That's all we have for this evening. If you still have questions about how to provide relational support to children and young people when they need it most, you can reach out to counselors and leaders in your child's school. We have prepared some key takeaways from tonight's webinar, which we have posted in the chat room. These will also be sent out to parents by your school. Please also note that from tomorrow and for the next 2 weeks, you will be able to replay tonight's webinar in PolyV using the same QR code and link that you've used this evening. A special thank you to Ms. Jeanie Dean again, our presenter in Australia, for her informative presentation and for answering the questions from our community members this evening. It certainly was a very useful topic. We invite you to attend our next episode of our Parents Webinar Series 2 on May 25th. This will be our last episode for this school year. We will be hearing from our Western co-principal, Mr. Andy Clapperton, and the Chinese assistant co-principal, Ms. Sissy Shen. Both from YCI's Shanghai Pudong, Andy and Sissy will lead us onto an exploration of the future of education, resilience in a complex world. This is a really relevant topic for every family, so don't miss it. We hope to see you again at our next webinar. Have a great evening.